It's my honor to introduce our next speaker, Mike Sommers, President and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. Mike leads the API, the largest national trade association for the oil and gas industry, representing every segment of the industry from upstream to downstream, and including more than 600 member companies that produce, process, and distribute most of the nation's energy. API speaks for our industry in Washington, develops the technical standards that keep our operations safe, and certifies the equipment and personnel that the modern oil and gas industry depends upon. Before joining API, Mike spent more than 2 decades in senior policy and political roles in Washington, including service as Chief of Staff to the Speaker of the House, John Boehner. He brings to this role a deep understanding of how policy actually gets made and a clear-eyed commitment to the American energy leadership. Please welcome to the stage, Mike Sommers.
Good morning. It is great to be here in North Dakota, and what an honor it is to follow Secretary Burgum. I will tell you that in my time in Washington, D.C., there has never been a better Secretary of the Interior than Secretary Burgum. What he is doing to transform this industry and to transform the Department of Interior is historic. So we are honored to have him for a short time in Washington to continue to grow the American oil and gas industry. But he's also surrounded by other great leaders. Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy, and Lee Zeldin as head of the Environmental Protection Agency. This is truly the energy dream team. And the people who are going to benefit from it most is our industry, the American oil and gas industry, the greatest industry in the world. I also want to thank Todd for that kind introduction, and of course, Governor Armstrong for his incredible leadership. This is going to be the first time that I'm in North Dakota this year, but not my first time here. I'm also going to be here later in July to be at the historic unveiling of the Teddy Roosevelt Library, and API is proud to be a sponsor of that library as well. Everybody in this room knows the Roosevelt story and what he means to North Dakota and what he did in Medora. But you know, it's also fascinating to me what President Roosevelt did after he left Medora. He, of course, became Assistant Secretary of the Navy and then led troops in Cuba and won, of course, the Battle of San Juan Hill. He went home to become governor of New York. And what you might not know is that when he was governor of New York, they got a little sick of Teddy Roosevelt in New York State. And they decided to ship him off and let him be vice president, because at that point, the job of vice president wasn't a real popular job. In fact, someone compared it to being a bucket of warm spit. And so when Teddy Roosevelt became vice president, he was actually pretty bored. And then a fateful day came when President McKinley was shot and killed. And then that guy that New York wanted to get rid of became president of the United States. And what did Teddy Roosevelt do? He didn't sit back and just decide to continue the McKinley legacy. He decided to make something of the presidency, and he made it an active presidency. And what he basically did was he seized the opportunity that he was given, an opportunity that he never expected in his life. It's similar to what this industry has done, and the industry in North Dakota in particular. For the last 75 years, since that first Iverson well, this industry continues to seize the opportunities that are in front of us. And the opportunity that we have today with a favorable administration that loves the oil and gas industry, that is focused on continued development of this great state, and with a public that finally understands how important energy independence and energy security are, this industry is poised again to seize a tremendous opportunity before us. And why does this matter now? 3 reasons. We all know about what's going on in the rest of the world. This terrible battle that's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, and 3 months of the strait being closed, and what energy security truly means in the United States now. Imagine the counterfactual. Imagine if we were 25 years ago and the United States was only producing 5 million barrels of oil a day, and the Strait of Hormuz was closed, where we were still dependent on all of that oil coming from the strait. We would be in a much different position today than when we are producing 13 million barrels of oil a day. And we're the world's leader, the largest producer of natural gas. You think about what's going on in the EU and Asia right now, where natural gas prices are spiking. And here in the United States, they've barely moved. That's because of you. That's because of American production, and that we've been able to step up to the plate, not just during this crisis, but during the crisis in Russia and Ukraine as well. We have continued to prove every single year how important American energy leadership is. We're also on the cusp of what we call the demand decade, where we're going to see historic amounts of new demand for American energy. In fact, Goldman Sachs suggests that we're going to need 50% more energy in 2040 than what we currently use in the United States. Where is that energy going to come from? It's going to come from technological advancements happening right here in North Dakota. We're going to have to continue to step up to the plate and ensure that we can provide the energy that not just the United States is going to need, but that the world needs. That's what energy security looks like. So the question remains, what do we need to do now? 1, we need to advance the right policies. And with this administration, we're doing that. Those policies include making sure that we continue to have access to federal lands and federal waters. We saw that historic lease sale yesterday, where a $4 billion lease sale. Let me remind you that the last record lease sale was under $1 billion. What that is a recognition by our industry and by the American people of how important this industry is going to be for decades and decades to come. Policy matters, and I'll give you an example of that. There are a couple of people in this room, like Ryan Lance from ConocoPhillips and Harold Hamm, who in 2015 were able to get the crude oil export ban lifted. This was a 70s era policy that American companies couldn't export crude oil. We estimate that if we didn't lift that crude oil export ban, that we'd be producing 3 million barrels fewer today. Imagine a scenario if the United States was producing fewer than 10 million barrels a day in this time of geopolitical crisis. Policy makes a difference. And if we get the policies right, the United States can continue to grow and lead. Another key policy that we need to advance, and again, we have a tremendous supporter here in Doug Burgum, is to continue to cut the number of regulations that this industry has to deal with on a daily basis. Right now, they are cutting historic numbers of regulations. And what we're seeing is historic production come on as a result. And finally, the big policy issue that we have to focus on is comprehensive permitting reform. North Dakota has seen this time and time again, where a federal permit holds up big projects. So finally, again, we have an administration that wants to advance that permitting reform. They're doing everything they can at the administrative level to advance permitting reform. But what we need is a partner in Congress. I'll also remind you that the Supreme Court has done everything they could with a couple of different historic decisions that have advanced permitting reform at the judicial level. The only branch of our government that hasn't done what they need to do is Congress. This is the year for us to finally get permitting reform done, and we think there's a chance that we can get it done in the next 2 months. And so what we're doing is we're planting seeds for that continued growth, similar to what we did during the export ban. If we can get the policy right, there's nothing that can hold our country back. The second big thing that we need to do is ingenuity. And everyone in this room understands how important ingenuity in our industry is, one of the most technologically advanced industries in the world. We all also know that we're leaving most of the resource in the ground. And the ingenuity that we saw at the trade show yesterday and that we continue to see in the advancements that we're pursuing, particularly the use of artificial intelligence could be the next fracking revolution in this country. So it's very exciting that we have the ingenuity to continue to advance these policies. And I think the third thing that we need is pride. This is an industry, and it's one of the reasons that I love it most, that has tremendous pride in what we do. I believe this is the greatest industry in the world because every other industry is dependent on what you do on a daily basis. I think sometimes we spend a lot of time thinking that people don't like us. Let me tell you something. I see it in Washington, D.C. every single day, and we poll on this at the American Petroleum Institute. Ours is an industry that is more popular than pharma, more popular than finance, more popular than tech, and it's because the American people finally have a recognition of how important energy is. We should wear that pride on our sleeves every single day because we know how important this industry is going to be. First, in the American history, what a historic industry we get to work in, how important this industry is going to be right now to continue to advance American freedom in our 250th year. And finally, we know how much oil and natural gas the world is going to continue to need, and it's going to continue to depend on the American oil and gas industry. So thank you for what you do. Governor Burgum mentioned that great Teddy Roosevelt quote about that this is not have an easy life, but we need to continue to pursue these strenuous endeavors because that is what freedom is all about. Thank you, North Dakota, for being such an incredible partner and continuing to advance American energy, freedom, and dominance. Thanks, Tom.
Go ahead and take a second seat down.
Got it.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you coming today and talking. And I know it's a hard act to follow behind Secretary Burgum, but I appreciate you doing that. I want to have a couple follow-up questions in the remaining time that we have here. So the political winds in D.C. have changed in our favor. But how important is it, and what does it mean to you to have Doug Burgum, Chris Wright, Lee Zeldin on the cabinet, the presidential cabinet, as far as policy and helping you with this?
Look, I am of the view, and I get to work with these great individuals every single day, that this is the energy dream team. These are three people who understand our industry better than anyone. Chris Wright, of course, came from our industry. Doug, being governor of one of our most important oil and gas states. But I don't want to forget Lee Zeldin. Lee, is someone that I've known since he was a member of Congress. This is someone who is unafraid to take on the status quo. And what he is doing on the environmental side and the leadership of the Environmental Protection Agency is historic. So we are blessed with these three great leaders. Any other industry that has other leaders in the cabinet, I would not trade these three for any other three in the United States cabinet.
No, it's a dream come true for us to have those three there. They're very, very important to us. And so Shale Revolution really started here in the Bakken. We're the ones that started it, developed it, experimented with it, got it to where it is. Then it went down to Texas. And Bakken is so instrumental because it was so uniform of a formation that if you moved over to the next mile and did something different, the results were due to what you did, not do anything with the geology. There weren't two variables in the equation. And so the U.S. has gone from 4 million barrels a day and declining rapidly up to as much as 15 million a day. And what does that shale revolution mean for us politically, basically, because we have that in our back pocket at 15 million barrels of oil per day?
It's changed everything. I mean, you think about where we were just 25 years ago, and the fact that because of the ingenuity of this industry, the United States is the world energy leader. That is not something that anybody 25 years ago would have been able to predict. And it was because of ingenuity, not because of a government program. And I think the American people have come around to understand how important this is. I often joke that there was a war on fracking and fracking won. But it wasn't poised to win when we first started this. It took this industry, and it took API, and it took the North Dakota Petroleum Council continuing to talk about how important this was. And I also think that we've benefited from some lawmakers' mistakes. You'll remember at the beginning of the Biden administration when they decided to cut off the Keystone Pipeline and essentially pause lease sales, both in the Gulf of America and on federal lands. Of course, the LNG pause. That resonated with the American people, and it allowed us to make the case about how important American energy leadership is. So we had a good strategy and we won. 2, the American people have seen real benefits in lower energy costs. And 3, we had lawmakers that made really bad decisions and allowed us to make the case about how important energy leadership is.
Yeah, we fought some big battles there against, Saudi Arabia was funding Gaslands 2, the movie, basically where people lighting gas out of their tap, and we were fracking into surface water, and Russia trying to stop the LNG exports because of the gas. And so now with LNG, it has really changed the world order. I mean, we were importing LNG, and now we're exporting LNG and providing it to the world. And Russia, 2/3 of the Russian gas that was going into Europe now has been cut off and replaced by LNG coming from America, which is wonderful. And so can you kind of elaborate more about how important LNG exports are to the world?
Absolutely. I mean, you think I was actually recently at an LNG terminal, one of these big, gleaming, beautiful export facilities in Louisiana. And I was touring it with the CEO of the company. And I looked around, and these are not hospitable conditions. And I said to the CEO, "So why are you doing it here?" And he said, "Well, there are a couple of different reasons. 1, and this is easy, access to the resource. And he said, 2, it's easy to export from here. He said, 3, there are no endangered species or indigenous peoples, so we were able to get this permitted fairly quickly. And then he said, 4, and most importantly, they want us here. So more important than access to the resource, more important than ability to export, more important even than no endangered species, no indigenous peoples. It was policy that mattered, that they had lawmakers and a population that wanted them there. And that can happen all over the country if we get the policies right and continue to make the case for our industry."
And you're in charge of basically driving our policy, and we appreciate everything you do for that. So the world needs reliable, affordable, and secure energy. Blocking the Straits of Hormuz basically says, well, it wasn't secure, and because it wasn't secure, it's not reliable. And so the world really has seen what happens when there's disruption in supply of 20 billion barrels a day and all that. So the Straits of Hormuz are shut in. I saw the estimate of 1.2 billion barrels of oil have not flowed through, and storage is low. Most of that oil coming out of Hormuz goes to Asia, China, and the Asian countries. Can you explain what the effects have been and you were on Fox Business the other day talking about, okay, what happens when it opens up? How long is it going to take maybe to get that back to an equilibrium and prices down? So everybody in this room is wondering, okay, if it opens up, where are we going price-wise and everything? So can you talk about some of the effects?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, we're going to be dealing in a higher for longer environment. It's not just oil. It is 1.2 billion that is currently, the world is at a deficit. But it's also LNG, of course. And they've bombed a number of these LNG facilities, particularly Ras Laffan. And it's going to take them, probably 5 years to rebuild after the fighting starts. We haven't even talked about the shut-in production that has occurred in the Middle East that's on the wrong side of the strait. But there are a couple of interesting things happening. And I think that $4 billion lease sale is a consequence of this. The United States and this industry is responding. And again, we need a policy environment to continue to support American production. But American energy leadership is going to continue to be the most important ballast in world energy markets. But what you're also seeing is our allies in the Middle East, they're starting to build new infrastructure. I mean, that east-west pipeline through Saudi Arabia, no one thought that it could pump more than 7 million barrels a day, and they just hit a new record, and they're pumping 8 million barrels a day. There's plans for a new pipeline in UAE, trying to avoid the strait forevermore because they don't want to be dealing with a hostile Iranian regime. So there are things that are happening that people are paying attention to. What is going on in Venezuela is another example of that. We've gone from importing 100,000 barrels of crude from Venezuela to over 400,000 barrels already. So the world is starting to look around for where are we going to get this resource if the strait is no longer going to be an option for us. But that's going to take time.
So you talked about the east-west pipeline, 8 million barrels a day, and they're trying to get around it. And UAE had one that was 2 million barrels a day, and Iran bombed that terminal. And in fact, UAE has been subject to more missiles than Israel has. And most people don't know that Iran has bombed 13 different countries over there, trying to play that aspect of it and going on our allies there. So everybody's kind of turning against them, but it's an interesting deal. We really couldn't have taken that kind of stance to have the Straits of Hormuz down if we didn't have that kind of oil production here. I mean, our prices have gone up some, and our gas prices haven't gone up that much at all. But we have that in our back pocket, as we said, and that's really has helped.
Yeah, I do think what we need to be worried about is world inventories continue to go down. We exported more crude and refined products than we ever have before last week. We're continuing to tap our strategic petroleum reserve every single week. SPRs around the world are being tapped. And I do think that as those inventories continue to go down, we're going to see continued price pressure in the United States. I don't think we'll see shortages, though we are starting to see shortages in motor oil in the United States. You saw an announcement from Costco, an announcement from AutoZone. Nissan said that their dealerships are going to be getting 50% less motor oil. So if you have a Nissan, I'd recommend getting an oil change soon. But the point is that other parts of the world are going to start seeing, and they already are, seeing shortages, particularly of jet fuel.
Yeah. So 1.2 million barrels taken off the table. See it in the storage tanks and everything. We're producing 102 million approximately of oil. It's not like we can just jump that up to 200 million and get this made up in a week. I mean, we can't really raise it up too much. It's going to take a long time to come there. And so basically, we kind of think, or I kind of think that basically we might drop down to the 75, 80s range, but we're not probably going back to that 55, 60 number for a long, long time. So UAE drops out of OPEC.
Yeah, that of course was big news. I do think from a UAE perspective, they've been considering this for some time and we're opportunistic at this moment. But I will say that there are pluses and minuses to that. OPEC historically does provide that, base of support during times of low prices in particular. So I think during an energy crisis like we're going through right now, them having the flexibility to produce more is good, but at the same time, when we're dealing with a lower price environment, you do want a strong OPEC.
They have a great relationship with Israel. I mean, they kind of teach the culture, the differences back and forth. They were the first ones to sign the Abraham Accord, so probably not really a surprise that they're getting the most bombs, and they were the first ones to come out of OPEC. So another thing that happened recently, the stoppage basically of the Jones Act. And so the temporary pause or something. And so now we can, Jones Act, basically, we were prevented from basically moving ships from port to port in the America, so we can't transport oil from Houston up around the coast unless the ship is American-made, American-crewed, American-owned. So what does that mean temporarily, and is there any chance that that's going to go away completely?
Well, we expect the president is going to continue to grant these 90-day waivers of the Jones Act, which has been very positive, particularly for the East Coast and for the West Coast. As you've noticed, prices in California in particular have skyrocketed. Why is that? You know, in the United States, we only import about 8% of our crude from the Middle East. But in California, it's 30%. So they're very dependent on what's coming out of the Strait. So what we've been able to do with the Jones Act waiver is move that crude from the Gulf of America over to California with foreign flag ships. It has been a real difference maker for California in particular.
Does it apply to other things other than oil as well?
Yeah.
I mean, Hawaii prices are high, Alaska's high.
Well,
anything coming from America has that, that extra tariff on it.
But again, another example of American ingenuity. API has a member company, JIRA, that now wants to put a terminal off the island of Hawaii so that they can use our clean-burning natural gas rather than being dependent on imports to that island state.
Interesting times. The world is changing right now, and
Every
really
day.
we can afford to do it again because we have that oil in the back pocket. We can afford to take these kind of stances. You talked about policies. Basically, what's out there that you're worried about that we need to be fighting for? What's your biggest concern?
So look, we are going to be dealing with a higher for longer price environment. And you've seen all of the exports that have occurred from the United States, from crude oil to refined products, to natural gas, LNG. So I think our biggest concern going into this current environment is a potential reversal of our exports. So I mentioned in my remarks that in 2015, we were able to lift the crude oil export ban. The president does have authority to impose that export ban during a time of national emergency. So we're very concerned that, sometime as prices continue to go higher, that the president or the Congress could seek to impose that export ban again, either on crude oil or on refined products. I'm particularly concerned about refined products. So fortunately, both Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum have repeatedly said that that is not on the table because they understand how important those export markets are for American production.
Definitely.
So that is one concern that we have. But we're also concerned, from populists in the United States Congress starting to discuss ideas of windfall profits tax, for example. So that is a real concern that we're looking at as we get into the campaign season.
We saw those windfall profit tax raise their ugly head in the 70s and the early 80s. We don't need those.
And they've never worked.
They never work. So, well, thank you for coming here today.
Thanks, Todd.
I really appreciate it.
You bet.
And please give Mike Sommers a hand for taking time today to join us.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
That was fun.